Good morning, everyone. I am Press Secretary Philomena Robertson. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's post-cabinet press briefing. As you are well aware, Grenada will hold general elections on June 23rd. That's in a matter of days. So this morning, we thought it important to bring in representatives from the Parliamentary Elections Office. With me this morning, I have the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Elvis Morain, and the Voter and Civic Registration Officer, Mr. Ferdinand Phillip. We will be talking about the process, what's been happening and what's to happen between now and June 23rd. Thank you to members of the media who have joined us this morning, and welcome also to viewers and listeners who have joined us via the various platforms available. Mr. Morain, I'll begin with you this morning by asking you to give a brief opening statement.
Thank you very much, Philo, and of course, good morning to the listening and viewing public, those online. We, the members from the Parliamentary Elections Office, we are happy to be again helping to edify the public as to where we are as we move forward to the polls on the 23rd of June. As we speak, the public is aware that nomination, concluded last week on the 1st of June. And of course, while we do this, there was also the issue of the publication of the current list. All right. I know the population was very much involved in scrutinizing the list, making sure that as an individual elector, that your names are on the list, that you're in the right polling division or polling, so where you're going to vote, your names appear as it ought to appear. So those things were happening. Also, there were electors who were observing the list as well to determine that if there's anyone that is not that should not be duly registered in a particular constituency. So we've been doing this. As of yesterday, based on Section 21 of the RPA, that 7-day period has elapsed. All right. So for that period, within that period, we expected, any elected official, any elector, to either on your own behalf file a claim. So a claim basically is when something affects you as a person. So your name is spelled incorrectly or whatever, you make a claim. But at the same time, somebody can object, because somebody can say, well, look, that name, an object. So, but once your claim is on your behalf, objection, of course, when someone determines that there is some inconsistency with what is on the list, you put forward that, right? So, and first, the claims or objections are registered to the office of the registration officer or returning officers now. Those claims as of yesterday, based on report reaching us, because it's not at that level yet, we know that we received some objections. I say objections/claims. St. George's Northeast, we had some there. It bordered around 60 because we had from both major political parties submitting objections. So it borders combinations about 60 plus, all right? Now, let me also add, that particular officer there was an active investigation already on 38 objections that were put forward before. And this is almost completed. What we realized is that the officer reported to me that part of the 48 that was put forward by that said person, inclusive of that is also some of that we were given active consideration to before. And St. John is the other place that seemed to have quite a few. I think it's about 70 something based on the last count. And we have outside of that, but is not significant in terms of numbers. So the officers, that's the officers are now doing the investigation, putting out the required notice, of objection or claim so that we can move forward in this process. While we do this also, we are focusing also because within that period, we've seen some objection, some observation. As we look at the debt list, we're also refining that as well. So these are the major activities as we prepare for our final list, the publication of our official consolidated list for election. So I want to thank, of course, everyone for their involvement. I think there was a lot of involvement. We saw the requests for, lists for different constituency or, for the entire nation. So we know that people were involved in the process and very much involved, and that must be commended. I just want to say, though, that I would like to see that kind of level of involvement way before elections, because it allows us to do the requisite investigation and to really attend to the objection or the claim. So I want to appeal to the public that this is not a one-time event. That's not an event that is just a focus around elections, but for us to see the need for us to continuously do that. Every time a publication, as a matter of fact, you can object at any time, all right? So we are saying if we get this, as a habit, a way of life, it means, therefore, that we would have, in terms of the list being sterile, we're going to do a greater job of this, because it is the business of everyone to make sure that this is done in a manner that is consistent. So I think it's an area where we need to strengthen in terms of the involvement, and the timeliness of, those objections and claims would be very helpful to us going forward. So I want to thank everybody so far for their involvement, and let us continue to work together to make sure that we refine the process as much as possible as we look forward to the 23rd of June.
Thank you, Mr. Morain. You spoke about what's being done now to investigate and resolve the claims and objections in preparation for the final voters list. What's the time frame we have for that final voters list?
Well, 21-4 says clearly, all right, and it starts with, the no registration after the Governor General reads, right, and it goes down to the third section, which talks about the 70, and the fourth says, immediately after the end of the period specified in subsection 3, the Supervisor of Elections shall print and publish, or cause to be printed, and publish an official consolidated list for electors. All right. So we have some tight timelines. We are looking at things, but and that is why I indicated earlier that it's important for us to do this in a timely manner, okay? Because we have to ensure that we're ready, and not just ready for the 23rd, but the 28th, because police will be voting on the 28th. So we are asking people as we go forward to make sure that we do this in a timely manner. And not only that, but I want to stick in that as well, that when the objections are brought forth, those objections can be substantiated. So it makes the process a lot easier. If it's vague, then it means that we have to call for more information, and then the process would be drawn out.
Okay, so we have that major activity happening between now and the 20th, 23rd. What else is the Parliamentary Elections Office involved in? Are there any other priorities over the next coming days or so?
Of course, we have a series of engagements, right? One is the engagement with all candidates. So we meet all candidates on Thursday, that's tomorrow. Yeah, we meet all the candidates, which we are going to update them as to what, are the expectations, as well as to detail to them the requirements relative to the agents. And I just want to say something about the agent here, Phillip. Sometimes people who question the process do not understand that in each polling station, each candidate on the ballot paper has an agent. And that agent helps for the whole transparency of the process. Okay? I've heard people mention, for instance, that ballot inside the ballot box, before whatever. Now, before the poll is called to open, everyone must be present, check the content, and make sure that that box is emptied, nothing is in it, and then that lock is placed in that box. The next time you remove that lock is when at the close of the poll, so you then count the ballot, right? And the ballot again is counted in the presence of agents, and that's how it's done, right? So in other words, people question, okay, the fact about every ballot must be counted. This is what's happening there, right? So if you, for example, where you have 4 candidates, you have 4 agents. 4 agents plus the presiding officer and the poll clerk, right? So that is the nature of it. So sometimes I hear people make those comments in the wider public, but you have the people are not there for show. They are there to represent you, to make sure that the process is what it's supposed to be according to the law.
Mr. Phillip, can I bring you into the conversation here? Anything you'd want to add before we go to media to take questions?
What I just take the opportunity to remind persons of is that what I would take the opportunity to remind persons of relates to the issue of the card. We have several hundred cards available at the various offices, and I must say here that persons are coming to collect their cards, but we continue to pass the message out there that every card that is at the office needs to be collected. We didn't print it just for printing sake. It is issued for voting purposes, and so we are doing our part. We are seeking to ensure that all of the individuals who have whether replaced their ID or applied for a new ID, we are seeking to ensure that those cards are printed and available for them. But we are urging persons now to make themselves available at the various offices, come and collect those cards, and to remind each of them that these cards are a requirement on election day. So you secure it. Okay, you secure that card, and you come to the polling station with your card. There are persons who may have expired cards. Again, we say secure your card and come, because this is what we use as an office for verification. So treat the card with the level of respect that it was intended for. And of course, we are doing all within our power or remit to ensure that on election day that an ease of voting is facilitated. We want to also remind persons that on that day there will be individuals who are challenged, whether it's a pregnant woman, someone who may just not be feeling well on that day, someone who may have some challenge, physical challenge that makes it difficult for them to come out and cast their ballot. And we appeal to the general public to, give preference to such persons, on that day. We also remind persons that, who are working, that we trust that by now they have made the necessary arrangements with their employers to ensure that they get the allotted time. It is there by law, but we do not want to create an antagonistic type of relationship, so that we can have the greatest percentage of the electorate coming out to cast their ballot.
Can you say specifically what is that provision in law?
Yes, basically it says that persons have to be allotted the prescribed time for voting. So it doesn't say that a holiday will be given to an individual who is working to go and vote. But within reason, the law seeks to ensure that the person will be given a required, for example, let's say you live in St. Mark, but you work in St. Joe, maybe Grand Anse. I have heard cases where employers have given a person the half day off. And I think that's reasonable. But in every case, because the individual is working, some arrangement needs to be made beforehand. Because at the end of the day, you do not want, yes, the law is the law, but you do not want to disrupt the economic function of a business, in allowing a person to process their vote. But what we have seen happening from time to time, and this is it's few and far in between, that an antagonistic relationship has been created whereby employers feel aggrieved to give persons a certain amount of time. And we have had cases where persons have taken advantage of that. And so we are trying to ensure that, that relationship between the employer, the employee, really the whole voting process is streamlined in a sense that there is no bitterness caused in the mouth of any one of those parties as we allow persons to go and cast their ballot.
I actually have one final question, Mr. Morain, before we go over to media. It has been confirmed that the elections will be observed by international missions from CARICOM and the OAS. From your perspective as the supervisor of elections, how important is this for the transparency of the process and also ensuring that we protect and safeguard the democratic process?
Well, this is very much significant in terms of for the process. And as I alluded to earlier, we have agents and so on. But all that observers' mission help really propel in terms of the free and fair elections, right? And these organizations have a great reputation for mounting observers' mission, and they have done it, for many years in terms of our context. So we trust that this would also give, the population some comfort that here is it, we have observers missions coming in to really oversee, to make sure that the process is going according to plan. So that is welcome news, and this should bring some confidence to the entire population that here is it that we have, people from outside observing, the process and it also helps because in terms of for the future, because these people do elections over, I don't want to say over the world, I want to use my words very carefully, but in a number of countries, and therefore we can learn a lesson or two from what they're doing. So I think it's welcome news, and from the electoral office, we are happy to have observers mission, to overlook this election.
Thank you, Mr. Morain. So at this time, I'll turn it over to representatives of the media who are with us this morning. I see we have Linda Straker. We have a representative from MTV News. We also have Nancy Maguire and Rena Pear-Thomas. Good morning to you, media colleagues. Any questions from you? I see Rena with a hand up and then Linda. So Rena, you can go ahead first and then we'll go to Linda. Good morning, Rena.
Good morning. I just have two questions. One, would the electoral office be able to address the issues that will be brought forward or, regarding the list? Would they be able to handle it by the time election, the 20th to the 23rd? And my second question is, what mechanism are in place to ensure that on election day, things are running smoothly? Are the persons who handling the ballot trained? Are individuals who are there representing the various parties or checking the list, are they trained as well?
All right. So good morning, Rena, and thanks for the question. So I would do the first part of the first question, and Mr. Phillip, I'll hand the next question to Mr. Phillip. And that is, it has to do with the list, and you speak there about, I guess, the claims and the objections we're talking about, and the period we have. Now, Rena, what happens is that we start the process. The process has to be done. No. What would make the difference in this process is how conclusive, is the evidence for each of the cases that brought forward. So once it is one that you don't have to, because it's a very detailed process, very, very detailed process. And if we do not have sufficient evidence to start, and we have to go back and forth and the engagement, it means that it will be very difficult to complete. And that is why I said earlier, it is important for us to do such as by law very early and not just wait for, a current list, because the current list is very tight, published within to the polling day. And sometimes I just wish that we would make that our business way before. I mean, election is too serious for us to just wait in the last minute to try to address those very important concerns. What we also observe in some cases is that even the people who brought forward objection, claims as well, an objection, the issue is not today. I mean, for example, someone who brought forward a claim, I saw one of the claims about 2 weeks ago, and that person went in to do the card in early 2021. You have a name, you have an error in the spelling of your name. But when you went in to do your card, you got a printout, and you're asked to check to make sure all the specifics there are correct. And then you have months after somebody comes and say, okay, look, my name is incorrect. I mean, that to me, it shows that we are not taking this process as serious as we ought to. We shouldn't have that situation coming before us at this time, all right? There are also objections which question people's residence. And these people have been there registered for a while. There are so many publications that went on before that. It would have made sense for us to take that level of, assertiveness to the process, so that at the end of the day, we wouldn't have, having to deal with all of these things. To me, what should really, the ideal thing should be where you have the last list is published from that, the list prior to that. To me, those should be your major concerns, as people who were added to the list from that period, but not having to deal with something 4 and 5 years ago. I think sometimes we just need to make it our business and realize how serious that process is. I'll hand over to Mr. Phillip to answer the second question.
In terms of what mechanisms are in place to ensure the smooth function on election day, already we have begun for quite some time now the training of our election officials, and these are namely our presiding officers, our poll clerks, and our marshals. These are the principal persons, especially the presiding officer and poll clerk, who will maintain order at the various polling stations on election day. So training is an ongoing process with them, and we, as per usual, we tend to look, we do a synopsis of what happened in our last general elections, and we build upon that, as I think as any good entity will do. But these are ongoing activities in terms of training. As the supervisor indicated, we will be engaging, I believe sometime tomorrow, the various candidates, because they play, they are part of the stakeholder process. They play a very important role in ensuring that the elections run smoothly come election day. Subsequent to that, the agents, because as Mr. Morain indicated, every candidate in every constituency at every polling station is entitled an agent, and so that agent represents their interests there, and so training has to be brought forward to these persons also. And we need to be aware, they are not just called agents, they are part of the legislation, and before they actually engage into the duty of an agent, they take an oath. Okay, and there are legal ramifications for all of these various individuals who function there. Critically, at every polling station, and we are already engaging the RGPF, we have had several meetings with them, as we all are aware, persons who are accustomed voting, that an officer is there to assist the presiding officer and poll clerk. And we normally make a joke, but there is seriousness to that. To the extent that we speak of electoral matters, the presiding officer commands that officer, not the commissioner of police on that day, but only as it regards electoral matters in that particular polling station. So persons can rest assured that we are not just in an ad hoc manner, carrying out a process, but there's legality to every aspect of what is being done, and it is there to ensure that the process runs smoothly. One of the critical things we have done, and I guess many individuals have seen it already, in terms of where you vote on elections day. We already, because it's online, the information how you can check your registration online, it is already there. You can go onto our website, peo.grenada.org, and you go on to search voters list. You input your name and surname or your registration number, and you would know your registration status, and then you can click on the select button, and you would know exactly which polling station you will be voting in. So this is all geared to smoothen the process, so to speak, to ensure that the maximum amount of persons who desire to cast their ballot on elections day are able to do so, and within a reasonable time frame.
In the past, have you had instances, it's available online now for persons to check, but in the past, have you had instances where persons maybe went to a different polling station and they had to go to the correct one?
Unfortunately, it has happened. It's likely it will happen again. We cannot get away from that. But even in such cases, our officers are trained, so that they can guide the person. And then there are cases where we would have multiple polling stations in one locality. Here we have marshals. So the marshals would assist persons in ensuring that they are in the right place.
So the important thing really is for persons to do their homework, check all the information beforehand.
And even now, we are saying to persons, make sure that your name, you check for your name, make sure that you are on that list. If you have not gotten registered, it's too late to go and do so now. But if you are, let's be realistic. We are human beings, and even the machinery that we use from time to time, there can be glitches. So that's why the legislation makes provision for you to check that list, and the legislation covers it in the physical. But what we have done, as you indicated, is that it's available online. So even if you're living in Timbuktu, wherever that is, you can go online and you can check that information. But it is critical that you establish and that you know your registration status, that you are registered. As a yardstick, I normally tell several persons, if you voted in the last elections, you should be on that list, except you have been removed through some infraction of the law.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip. Let's go now to Linda Straker. Linda, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Philo, and the persons from the Parliamentary Elections Office. I have a list of questions, a lot of it which are actually from the members of the public. They're simple questions. So the first one will be, one person wants to know, what is the correct way to make that X? Because she formerly served as an agent, and there were there were ballots that was put in the area of spoil because some felt it was not a proper X, others felt it was a good X. So can the Parliamentary Election Office, maybe if we can demonstrate to people what is X on an election ballot? My other question has to do with the data. We were told, I think there was 87,000 plus persons on that voters list. Is the office today can tell us possibly number of new registrants from the last election from 2018 to now, in terms of the full list? How much are male, how much are female? Is there a breakdown as to age range and occupation and so? Do you have that level of data that you can share with the public? Political parties may have their own thing and do their own canvassing, but sometimes the public need to understand that a little bit more. Can they share that type of data with us? That's the first two. I await answers. I do have more.
Thank you very much for the questions, Linda. Mr. Phillip?
Yes. Again, good morning to Ms. Straker. In terms of the mark, and we hear persons talking about an X. What is critical is that you have a candidate for whom you desire to vote. There's a box alongside that candidate's name and their symbol where you're expected to put a mark. It does not necessarily have to be an X. Okay, it can be you can put a little circle inside of that box. You can put a, what do you call it, a P, a correction P inside of that box. But it needs to be clearly within that box that is alongside the candidate that you are choosing. And so we do not want persons to get too colorful in putting their mark, because one of the things that causes a ballot to then be rejected is if, when it is being counted, you can identify who that voter is. Okay, so maybe they place their name, maybe they place their telephone number, their address, things like that, and so forth. So it's simple a mark, and probably an X. And I guess everybody is aware of what an X is. An X might be the simplest one that you put, okay? But it is your mark. And we urge persons to be simple in just placing your mark within that allocated, that spot. And that will clarify any of the ambiguity. So it's difficult for us as an office to speak to the issue that Ms. Straker raised about what persons have said their experiences were. But we urge persons to stick within the basics. Place a mark, and the mark could be an X, as indicated. Unfortunately, she touched on issues that may be beyond the remit of the system that we are using. And I definitely have heard Mr. Morain on several occasions, even our systems administrator, indicating the limitations of the system that we are currently using. And of course, putting forward a case sometime in the future for an improved system that should be able to pull out the amount of males, the amount of females, the amount of new registrations, the amount of replacements, a system that can do that. But currently, the system that we are using does not facilitate such. And I don't know if Mr. Morain would like to add to it.
I just want to add something. Going back to the first question, right? Just to clarify, the box, we like to see the box. Now, there's no little box on the side, right? There's a box that encompasses all information. So the candidate name and so on, the symbol, and on the side of the symbol you put that. So there is that whole area. Some people believe that there's a little box where you put the X. There's no little box, right? There's an area that actually, if you want to demarcate or maybe identify that candidate, and then so you have the name, the address of that candidate, right, the profession of that candidate, you have the symbol, and of course there is a space on the side where you insert your mark. So there is no other little box, so you insert the symbol. So that is clear, right, as we go forward. I don't think I need to address, because Mr. answered the question already, and that's why I called before that we need to get an updated software. Because we can generate all those reports, because the information that Linda is asking is critical. Not just for us, but for the entire public to understand the process. But we are limited. We can't just generate that, so we can generate the reports necessary based on the system design. So that's why I say we need to have a software that can generate all those reports. So you call to say, okay, how many people voted today? Registered today? How many people under that age? You can pull the data, you can do analysis and so on, come up with graphs, charts and so on. We don't have that leverage on the system as we speak.
Okay. In terms of clarity of making your mark on the ballot paper, maybe from a comms perspective, we can create a graphic, do a sample ballot paper and illustrate to people how they can make their mark, and that we can circulate to members of the media. So let's put that as an action point for the next couple of days. Linda, we'll come back. Follow-up. So go ahead.
Can I go? Okay. My other question had to do with the number of objection and claims. Can the supervisor explain to us, I hope he's aware though, what are the reasons for those objections? I heard he mentioned quite a bit from St. John's. Is it a case of wrong surname? Is it a wrong place of residency? What are the main reasons been given for those objections?
Thanks again, Linda. I cannot give all the details for St. John's. What I do know for because I got a more comprehensive review from Northeast, it has to do with residents, debts, but it's mostly residents and debts, right? we have been dealing with quite a number of, prior to this, objections from St. John's, which was predominantly deaths. All right, so I don't want to speak out of turn when it comes to what the composition is like for St. John's. So sometime in the day I will get that details in terms of what it is. But what we saw based on a trend is residents, deaths, right? Those were the major ones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morain. Nancy McGuire, we come now to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. I would like to go to the objections and claims. You indicated there's more than 60 in St. George Northeast and, excuse me, more than 70 in St. John. And these are, as you indicated, being investigated. How are they being investigated? You indicated it was a detailed process. Do you have a cadre of officers that are doing these calls and checking on these? And I'd like to know how many in total there are in the country. And do you have enough time to deal with them all? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for the question. Now, the process is clear within the law as to who and how it is done, right? So when you file an objection, you file it to the registration officer, okay? And that registration officer will do, in terms of go through the process. That is, there are a number of forms that need to be issued. So once you get the objection, you then need to issue through whether it is delivery or by registered mail to each of the person or individuals that are objected against. They must get that. And when you do that also, there's another form that you also, the person who is objecting to these people, you also would have to, so if I say John James, I send that out to John James, I must also inform the objector, if you want to say that this is done. Then there's a time where you meet, and that meeting, so that form indicates also the time when you meet the parties, right? The objector and as well as the person objected to. And then the persons will they present the evidence of the claim. Now, when that is done, if you are not satisfied, or even before you get to the stage, why do that? You may ask, and another form again might ask the objector for added information because you believe it's not sufficient to really put forward, So this has to be done. And when that is done, you then publish. You must cause to publish the list of people objected against. Where after that, even if you have the case is been heard, and you then have to communicate again to them what your decision is. Not necessarily just like in a meeting, but you have to in those forms. When that is done, the person, if that person whatever the decision, if they disagree, they can then file a counterclaim. So it's a very detailed process, and you can go back and forth. Now, she also asked whether we have sufficient time. And as I said earlier, it depends on the evidence bring forward now for the claim, all right? If you have to go in search, for details, it makes the process very difficult. That's why I say earlier as well, those objections and claims need to come in a timely manner, all right? So we can really give, the necessary, because one of the things that people must be very clear about, the supervisor of election must be without a doubt, all right, that this person has to be removed. If that's not the case, the supervisor of election can't remove the person. So you must be very conclusive in your evidence that this person, the evidence is clear, and therefore action must be taken to remove that person.
And if I may be allowed to just add, to strengthen what Mr. Morain indicated here, the person doesn't agree with the decision of the presiding officer, the returning officer or registration officer, they can appeal to the supervisor. The supervisor upholds the decision of the returning officer. That person can take the matter to court. So you see here that it is imperative that not just because we are here speaking now, but as we go forward, that individuals raise the objections as Mr. Morain appealed at the time that you see the infraction, the alleged infraction, rather than waiting just when an election is, we're on the brink of an election, when in several cases it may not be feasible to have that issue addressed, because it is a burden that is placed upon the supervisor before he finally determines, yes, that person is to be removed or not.
Thank you, Mr.
So are you then suggesting that it is not feasible to deal with these 140 plus objections during the time that you have, given all the forms and the back and forth and the repercussions? Are you saying then that these will not be dealt with for this particular election? Thank you.
No, Nancy, we are not saying that. We said that it is inherent on the evidence brought forward at this time, right? As a matter of fact, I earlier indicated that in particular St. George's North East, there were about 30 that we were, no, 30 because we had addressed 30 that we were actively investigating, and we are about to conclude on that. So within that same 48, there's about 30 or thereabout, 28, 30, that we conclude on already. So in other words, these would be dealt with. We are looking now at the new ones that are brought to the fore, how best we can go forward. And I said it is inherent on the evidence, that we have right now to deal with it. So we are not saying that, okay, we can't, because we have to initiate the process anyway.
Mr. Morain, I have a question here. In terms of the objections, are there instances where there are multiple objections from different persons objecting to the same thing? Is that possible? Or once you've recorded an objection, then that stands, even if someone comes with a similar objection on the same matter? How is that handled?
You treat all objection as a specific case. So as a matter of fact, that would strengthen the fact in terms before we go forward, because now you have more individuals involved in the process, and you might have a greater pooling of evidence to be brought to that particular case, right? So because as that's one of the questions I asked of the registration officer in the St. George's Northeast, because I said both major political parties record objections. So I was asking, please indicate to me, which she couldn't do at that time, whether or not you have at least, the both parties objecting to the same individual or individuals.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morain. Nancy, anything further from you before we move on to Rena? Okay, that seems to be it from Nancy. Rena, we come to you, and then Linda Straker, we'll come back. Rena?
Yes. One of the issues that came out from the last election was that of the quality of the ballot paper. It was a bit, one of the biggest complaint is that it was a bit too transparent. Is that the same quality of paper we have now, or has that changed?
Rita, let me just say this. You say one of the big issues that came out. Now, yes, some people might have raised concern, but that was never recorded from the observers or anybody mentioning this, right? So people might have said in different pockets, in different ways, that they felt it was that. But in terms of recorded observations, that is not part of any of the reports that was brought forward. Now, we always look to improve in terms of the quality of the paper that we have. It's important that we look at that. We have done sample ballots. We are satisfied, okay, that this is where we are. What we also did, Rena, was we are mindful, even if it wasn't part of the report, we heard it mentioned. So what we did is also increase the number of folds. So like when somebody casts a ballot, you drop the ballot down a bit so you can increase the number of folds. So because people are saying that even people could still see. Now, also, I want people to understand this. Now, if someone, a presiding officer, is there trying to observe a ballot as to vote for, this is an infraction. Full stop. Right? Your business is the ballot paper is brought before you, right? The person, all you do, take off the foil, and the person immerse their hand into the ink, you give them back, and they drop the ballot. So I don't know that any presiding officer will be putting up thing in the light to see who people vote for, right? And it's something that we have to be real. And I'm saying before that there are checks and balance, because here is it, you have your agents in sight. And if that is happening, of course, it's an infraction. So let's not just speculate that, okay, well, look, this is what the case. But I mean, I don't think, based on our training and what we have given to these officers, that I would see people put up their hand to see who people vote for.
Linda, we're back to you.
Hi, yes. Morning. My follow-up had to do with Mr. Morain mentioned deaths. Is it a case where people are objecting that dead people are still on the ballot, like recent death or dead persons who have been passed on 4 or 5 years ago? Is that the case? Now, the other most important question I want to ask: we are in COVID. We have a situation of fluctuation, cases going up, cases going down. Is there any special arrangement that will be made on the day for one persons who are probably recovering from COVID or basically engaging in public health practice? What will be the arrangement on the day that is linked directly to public health practice? Then the link to that, I also want to know, follow up on the question that was asked with Rena, not necessarily the quality of the paper, but the ink that has been used. Everybody will be dipping their hand in that. How that is now linked to public health practice in terms of COVID. Enlighten me there, please.
The first question she asked, I think, related to the fact that are people objecting that persons on the list are dead and the period.
All right, so let me answer the question with the deaths. So, Linda, from time to time, people object to deaths, and the deaths could be recent or it could be before, right? As I explained in another program before, the deaths sometimes is you can miss one or two, in the sense that, and let me just back up a bit. I think now we have a better way of receiving information from births and death. Prior to that, when the system started, we didn't have that kind of support mechanism. So that's why you might hear people say, okay, somebody a lot of years ago is on there, right? And that's why we ask people to object so we can help to clean that. The other thing is that, so we see some of that will be pulled up, and as much as recent people would come into the fore. Let me just say this, that, you know, we have to minimize and track the deaths down. But I'll tell you this, is that there would be dead people on the list, all right? And let me tell you why I say that, because when the list is published, people die. All right. What we are concerned about is people who die a long time, but they would, because within the time of the final list and the date of the poll, people will die. All right. People will be on the list. So we have to minimize that to see how we go forward. Now, one of the things I believe, and I'm not proud that we have dead people on the list, but I want to go back to a point Mr. Phillip made earlier, and that is about emphasizing the need for us to use our voter identification card. Because I've heard complaint that people say, okay, they show people vote and dead people's name. What I do know, if you walk with a card, no ghost walking in with a card to vote. So we are emphasizing that people use a card to minimize this. I am saying all of us need to understand that we all have to contribute to free and fair elections. It's not just about, you know, yes, we have to do our part, and of course the onus is on us to do it. But at the same time, we can actually put this dead people voting and people voting name to zero once people walk with their ID card on the day. And that is something that I'm encouraging people to do, and to see the significance, because it helps to minimize voter frauds. And this is something that I want us to really emphasize. So let me just give it to Mr. Phillip to answer the next question.
Yes, in terms of the practices on election day, as it relates to the COVID in the air, Because there are no enforced regulations as it relates to how we treat with it, we have appealed and we continue to do so to the general public too. If you know that you have COVID, please indicate beforehand to the returning officer in that particular constituency where you have to vote that you are COVID positive, and an arrangement will be made. Of course, it will be done discreetly, but it will be made to facilitate your voting, yet at the same time not to compromise the health of other persons whether poll workers or other persons other individuals who come to cast their vote on that day. In general, if you are exhibiting flu-like symptoms, though there is no law that prevents you from just going free and fair to cast your vote, but we do advise you and urge you to wear your mask, to sanitize your hands. And at every polling station, we are also doing our part. So we have already secured hand sanitizers, and persons will be expected to sanitize their hands as they come to cast their ballots. But the emphasis here is for persons who may be positive on that day. You are not debarred from coming and cast your vote, but you are urged to contact the office beforehand and the returning officer to be exact in that constituency, and an arrangement will be made to facilitate your voting without compromising the health of others.
I just want to emphasize this because I know it might be running people's head. Now, when we say the accommodation will be made, the accommodation will be made so that person could vote according to the rules. It's not a special condition. So they'll be vote in the precise manner. It's not like we go into your home or we go into a vehicle, right? You come based on the rules. So what we do is just from a health perspective to minimize that. But what we do, we accommodate you. You wouldn't be standing along. We try to get you expedited. You do the process, but it is done in the precise manner based on the rules.
Thank you for that. I think she asked to specifically read there was a concern about dipping in the ink, and how is that aligned to public health practices in light of COVID? Has any consideration been given to that in particular?
Well, the answer to this is no, right? The inking is a requirement based on the process, and we haven't given that. I mean, I have been speaking to even some of my counterparts in the region, and it is done in the prescribed way. So we are saying, as Mr. Phillip said, people must take that you have to protect yourself as well. There is a personal responsibility, right? So we have to follow in this manner.
Thank you very much. Linda, anything further from you? Linda?
Hi.
Do you have anything further this morning?
Like there's a little thing in when I have to be unmuted. Yes, the training that will be undertaken with the candidates and so. Are you bringing all of them together, or it is within the separately by parties? And what is the training really about?
Yes, they are, as much as it is reasonable, we are trying to bring persons, because we cannot treat the training by a party level or in too small a unit level. We need to bring persons together in bulk. And so I know tomorrow all of the candidates will be asked to come to the stadium, I believe at 1:30, for a generalized overview of what is expected of them come election day, and by extension, what is expected of their agents who are going to represent them. One of the critical things, and persons, I guess several persons are aware of that individuals as candidates per se can vote in constituencies other than where they live. And so there's due process, okay? There's a form that has to be filled out, form number, I believe 5B, has to be filled out in duplicates. It has to be brought to the Supervisor of Elections, who will endorse the forms and give that candidate a copy of the form, which he or she must bring to the presiding officer in the constituency where they are voting. That is if they are voting in a constituency other than where they live. So then they have to bring it on election day, they have to bring that form. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to cast their ballot in that constituency. The other candidates in that constituency must be made aware. So that's why it's critical that due process is followed, because the supervisor then has to make the other candidates in that constituency aware that this person, though not registered in the constituency, will be allowed to vote at polling station X. And at the same time, where he or she was duly registered, it is also communicated that that individual is not allowed to cast a ballot. So it's a process. It does not allow for a person to vote in two different places. The roles of the agents, it's a critical function also that will be disseminated at that time. But what the whole gist of what is being done is to ensure that we do not have two different structures, power structures operating, is that it's one smooth, streamlined process. The candidates, along with their agents, working along with the presiding officers and the whole elections office structure to ensure a smooth process on election day.
Just to emphasize on this, now, Linda, remember that the agents are not working, they are not workers of the electoral office. So it's important that they are working on behalf of the candidates. So therefore, it's important for us to emphasize to the candidate as to what is expected of the agent. Because Mr. Phillip said something earlier and he might sound lightly, but the presiding officer is the one that takes charge, right, on that particular polling station and that day. So it's important. Now, I just want to add a little bit of clarity to what Mr. Phillip said in terms of the candidate voting elsewhere. Now, it happens when the candidate, in other words, the candidate wants to vote for himself. So you're running in a constituency where you are not residing. So that's what it is. So the candidate now, to cast the vote for himself, he must make that application. And when that is done, it's not secret, because it means that for his vote or her vote is transferred to that constituency, so he votes once. So therefore, that is why for transparency, we must inform. And we must inform the presiding, returning officer in the constituency to which that particular candidate is registered. So we avoid the duplicates.
Okay, I see Rena's hand is also up. Rena, we take a final question from you before we wrap up this morning. Rena?
Yes, just could they just remind us what are the arrangements made for vulnerable community personnel? We're talking about persons with disabilities and the elderly.
Arrangements for persons with disabilities.
Yes, we, in terms of vulnerable persons such as the elderly, we appeal to persons to give preference to them. You know, somebody, a senior citizen, comes in to vote. You know, they may not be blind, they may not be maybe physically challenged in the sense of maybe no legs or something like that, but just age. Maybe someone, again, who is pregnant, as I indicated earlier, maybe someone who just falls ill on that day, has bad feelings, whatever. We appeal to the rest of the electorate present to facilitate such persons. But of course, if we are talking about individuals who are incapacitated through some physical ailment, or someone who is visually impaired, then there are provisions that are made for such persons, you know, to be able to cast their ballots. And so our officers are trained, our presiding officers, our poll clerks, they are trained to deal with such cases. And in the case of the elector who is blind or visually impaired, that person can come with someone to assist them. I must say this is an issue that has been a ticklish issue of recent times, and the Supervisor of Elections has, made, provisions to engage with persons that are concerned, for their rights in this regard. And I do believe that in the near future, you would hear some more information on that. For persons who have physical challenges, of course, the presiding officers and them again, and along with the agent, because it becomes an open vote, can request the assistance of the presiding officer to facilitate them in that regard. But generally, we at every polling station we look at if it is in a somewhat challenged area, RAMs will be placed there for persons to facilitate the ease of access to the polling station.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip. So at this point, I think we've gone just about 7 minutes over the allotted time. But Mr. Morain, any final thoughts or comments you'd want to leave with members of the media and the listening and viewing audience?
Thank you very much. And let me first of all extend my appreciation to the media and of course those online, for the comments and the questions. Now, we are nearing elections that day, okay? And I want to say, just re-emphasize something I said earlier. Free and fair elections is inherent on all of us, right, to do what we're supposed to do. And I would say this. I want to encourage the entire population to be responsible, because I have seen information being disseminated that, to me, the only intention is to confuse or to create some sort of discord in the public, and it's unfortunate. If we are so serious about this process, let us make sure that it works, right? Because I would say to the general public, let us inform, let us educate, but also to remember your official source of information is the Parliamentary Elections Office. And I want, you can communicate with us, ask us as to what's happening, how we go forward. I want to close by emphasizing the need, going back to the card. Now, when you enter that polling station, all right, you would ask a few questions, you present your card and so on. Now, Mr. Phillip mentioned it earlier, you present the card if your card was replaced. If you didn't replace your card, you present that card that carries the expiry date, the 31st of January 2020. Not other cards that you had before previous elections, right? And I just want to, it would be remiss of me if I leave it not to just touch a bit on the expired card, because I've heard all kind of comments. Now, let me say first and foremost, categorically, that the RPA is very silent on expired card, right? At the time of replacing cards in 2020, and of course the members of the media will recall that press conference, we talk about replacing cards. We talk about it becomes an administrative process because, of course, the act is silent. Now, there's nothing which says that if I don't replace my card, I'm removed from the list. So in other words, when you see that list, the 80-something plus people is inclusive of a number of individuals who have not replaced the card for some reason or the other, right? We are saying that you are on the list, you're entitled to vote. The card is supposed to help with the verification process to minimize the said voter fraud. A passport can do it. A NIS card can do it. A driver's license can do it. Why? Because that card carried a registration number. It carries a photo of you, right? Because when you get into that polling station, they would call your registration number. So you match it one time. Now I am saying, if we are very so mindful about free and fair elections, we would see the value in this. And I say that with a passion. We would see the value in this. And not us trying to just create discord about whatever. This card was issued by the office. This card, there's nothing which says, as I said, apart from the specimen in the act that talk about expired card. I want to add this. A young person who turned 18 in December of 2019, or even January of 2020, went and did the card, and unfortunately the system at the time had a fixed expiry date. And that was the downside of that as well. We've adjusted that now. So it means, therefore, that that person's photo is current. A few months you have a card, and you're telling me about expired card, you can't use it, right? The process is for us to make sure that this is as transparent as possible. Now, there are two major things that lead to free and fair elections. One, we talk about the preparation of the list, right? And that is why I asked everybody earlier that we need to make sure that we do what we have to do. The strength of the list being sterile is the claims and objection, the timely claims and objection. Because if, for example, somebody walks into any electoral office and they meet the requirement for registration based on the document and so on, the office could never. As a matter of fact, we can face with a legal challenge. We cannot deny them registration. However, the person might present, we are not policing documents, so maybe present document is genuine. But sometime afterwards you realize. So somebody comes and say, well, no, John James is not living in this place. You're caused to search and to make sure you go through, and then you can remove that person based on the objection. Right? So the list is the first part. The other part is the day of elections, in terms of how you execute the activity in terms of within the law. And I would say to you, our law may not be perfect, but what is going to stand in it is within the law is important. The election has to be executed within the law. And that's what we committed to do. I also want to send us a clear message to all the workers of the electoral process. The integrity of the process is a collective part, a collective whole of all the pieces. The integrity is not just one person. Everybody must employ that characteristic to make sure. And that's why we emphasize that all our poll workers, you do this job as professional, right? And you follow the law, right? And when we do this, we would have, everyone can feel comfortable that we have executed an election that we are proud of within the system and the construct we have. And the last point I want to make going forward, and I've been saying it on all my recent appearance of the media, we have lost an opportunity through constitutional reform. And I believe wherever government is in place, we need to pursue constitutional reform so that we can strengthen electoral reform. All right? So a lot of the things that people are raising should be things of the past. And we must see constitutional reform as the business of the people, so that we can begin to address the electoral process. And I think once we can address this, we are closer to making sure that we have, a more transparent system. So that is one. We need to look at it. And I mean, of course, it's a policy thing. We need to look at constitutional reform that would inform the electoral process in terms of reform. We need to look at our constituency boundary commission, because there's some boundary issues that we need to address. And of course, once these things are addressed, we go into enumeration, which means a start over. Well, I missed one, and also have an updated software. Then I think we are well placed going forward for future elections. So it's something that we need to look at, and it's something that I think the office is already committed to ensuring that we go forward, because we have to improve our craft to make sure that elections are a serious thing, that at the end of the day, we do that in a manner that is consistent. So I want to thank the media and thank everyone for the support. And we continue to encourage people to bring the comments in as we seek to address this matter, in a way as we go towards the 23rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morain. Also to you, Mr. Phillip, for your presence here this morning and for helping to educate and inform members of the media and, by extension, the Grenadian public about the electoral process, what's happening, what will be happening in the coming days in the lead up to general elections and advanced polling by police officers on the 20th of June. That's where we put a wrap on things this morning. I'm Press Secretary Philomena Robertson. I thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in again next time. Until then, continue to be safe.